It's Tuesday, February 27, 2024. And in this slide you see 3 headlines that was taken from my newsfeed regarding some of the critical issues that is affecting society in different geographic locations upon the earth. This is just a snapshot of how things are going to devolve even more, and this presentation is going to demonstrate how the next conflict is going to be unlike any other. Now we protest for many things and anythings. There's racial equality wherever you are, there's police brutality and overreach, there's political neglect, environmental issues, war, and so many ideological matters that society is trying to get a handle on. So what makes the protest that is being played in the video through the crack window, which is symbolic, different from any other? War protesting, there is nothing new about it. In the 60s and 70s, we saw demonstrations against the Vietnam War, as it was one of the hot-button situations of the time, along with racial inequality and so-called women's rights. This video shows a recent protest where the latest Israeli Hamas discord popped off, causing a lot of protests to take place simultaneously across the earth. This is the current hot button issue that will lead to an escalation of tensions, along with many other things that is going to be discussed. These protests are a reflection of the current tensions and divisions consuming society worldwide or earthwide. And as the protests and discords escalate, it's going to be unlike any other you have ever seen, heard of, or experienced. So, spoiler, there's not going to be Switzerland this time around, aka there's no neutrality. Everybody has to pick a side. So one may ask how the situation depicted in the video will propel the entire society into conflict and antagonism against each other. Stay tuned with us to find out. So greetings to the house of Jacob and the remnant called by Yahweh's name. This is the humble servant along with his wife, Super D, in support to help with the reading.
We hope that everyone is doing well and are in good cheer. The intended purpose of the humble servant is to be a source of support information from the servant's understanding of the Hebrew Scriptures and how it correlates to the current global affairs. The servant is not an apostle, pastor, teacher, deacon, elder, rabbi, prophet, reverend, morey, etc., or hold any seminary qualifications or high religious office.
So in other words, we are nothing. We are just here to present information.
As a servant, the only concern is to execute the will of the Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, holding fast to his truth, and hopefully providing knowledgeable insights toward making informed decisions. So the listed abbreviations and terms are used to mean the following.
And we're not going to read them off, but you can read it. So these are some of the sources we're going to be quoting from. So just take note of it when you see it in the presentation.
The primary scriptures. Oh.
So we have a trigger warning here.
Many have sensitivities toward the information provided on this platform. If this does apply to you, please navigate away from this presentation. On some platforms, this content is considered PG. If you are underage, please navigate away from this platform. If you are underage and truly interested in listening, do it with a parent or guardian alongside. Thanks for stopping by.
And we both thank you for stopping by. So we are getting into unlike any other. So we are revisiting recent contemporary acts which will give us some discernment into how current circumstances with war protest and every other social dissension, past and present, has been orchestrated and will soon or eventually catapult everything into this situation spoken of by the prophet Isaiah.
Isaiah 24:1. Behold, Yahuwah is about to lay waste the world, and will make it desolate, and will lay bare the surface of it, and scatter them that dwell therein.
Kind of sounds like the beginning of Genesis, where everything was desolate and without form and void. So, get ready. We're at a boiling point with a lot of things. Someone must become willfully ignorant to disregard the signs, or to think everything that is happening is all organic, or will eventually subside and the populace will go back to normal. To be quite honest with you, nothing about our society is normal. So we're going to unpack how wars, and we believe they have been all orchestrated, assisted in degrading society by whom we termed the wicked and evildoers among us. So wars and revolutions are the calling cards of the hidden forces that have been allowed to shape each generation and iteration of society. After Yahuwah placed the authority into these entities' hands, and you can read Daniel chapter 2 for Nebuchadnezzar's dream, that gives the details, they have since been busy trying to shape society into their image and likeness as at the Tower of Babel. Also, they are diligently erasing the true knowledge of the God or the Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which is resulting in misguided understanding where he is concerned and the strict scriptures are concerned.
With the muddying of the history events, the prophets of the Baals or the Lords have been putting things over on us. Discernment is a strong asset towards understanding what's truly taking place.
And this reference from Daniel will illustrate that discernment that we need.
Daniel 2:21. May the name of Yahuwah be blessed from everlasting and to everlasting, for wisdom and understanding are his.
Amen. People are potentially powder kegs waiting to ignite. There's a lot of stress and frustration with people, and if you do talk about current events with your friends and family, I'm sure you would also feel that anxiety that is building up. When we have diverse groups of people commingle together, it is the making of an explosive state of affairs.
So Daniel 3:1-5. In his 18th year, Nebuchadnezzar the king made a golden image. Its height was 60 cubits, its breadth 6 cubits. And he set it up in the plain of Diera, in the province of Babylon. And he sent forth to gather the governors and the captains and the heads of provinces, chiefs and princes, and those who were in authority, and all the rulers of districts, to come to the dedication of the image. So the heads of provinces, the governors, the captains, the chiefs, the great princes, those who were in authority, and all the rulers of districts were gathered to the dedication of the image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And they stood before the image. Then a herald cried aloud, To you it is commanded, you peoples, tribes, and languages, at what hour you shall hear the sound of the trumpet, and pipe, and harp, and sackbut, and psaltery, and every kind of music. You shall fall down and worship the golden image which King Nebuchadnezzar has set up.
So in this passage of scripture we have those three key words bolded: peoples, tribes, and languages. Again, nothing that we are currently experiencing is new off the press. This has been ongoing from generation to generation by those who have been put in authority given other circumstances. And for added measure, you can also include the events of Esther. It's the same theme about peoples and tribes and languages being together, and the wicked among them going after the house of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who were in exile and captivity at that moment. So some things like the slave trade, war, and other civil issues have pushed society to the current circumstances, where it seems that the barrel of a gun would be the only solution to fix the mess, or some of us may think politicians is going to fix the mess. That's a whole other kettle of fish. The so-called African transatlantic and sub-Saharan slave trade moved souls from one end of the earth to the other. So that's one way things were moved in terms of people. War also assisted with the mass displacement of tribes, and then hot button social issues such as religion, politics, gender, and the likes also caused persons to be displaced.
The displacement of people, tribes, nations is not by accident and has been the calling card for social control by the wicked and evil doers. It has been a well-organized situation that traces its roots back to the antiquity of the Hebrew Scriptures. So Genesis 14:11-14. And they took all the cavalry of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their provisions and departed. And they took also Lot the son of Abram's brother and his baggage and departed, for he dwelt in Sodom. And one of them that had been rescued came and told Abram the Hebrew, and he dwelt by the oak of Mamre the Amorite, the brother of Eshcol, and the brother of Hunan, who were confederates with Abram. And Abram, having heard that Lot his nephew had been taken captive, numbered his own homeborn servants 318, and pursued after them to Dan.
So the trade in people is not new. This has been going on in antiquity. And here we have an example of Abraham, our patriarch, raising up strong men to go and rescue his nephew Lot, whom he had a close relationship with. And this has been a recurring theme from generation to generation. And this has caused a lot of mixing to take place. So war is the main calling card used to restructure society as it triggers other intended events that precipitate mass deportations, destruction, death, and it also redraws geopolitical boundaries. It's sort of a house cleaning for these people who are running the shop, and as we now embark on our discernment safari, we're going to start off in what we term geopolitically designated Europe.
The Napoleonic Wars from 1803 to 1815, the Crimean War 1853 to 1856, Franco-Prussian War 1870 to 1871, World War I and World War II, which is 1914 and 1918, 1939 and 1945. Each of these highlighted conflicts and the many others not mentioned reshaped the face of Europe as geographical boundaries were redrawn.
So here's a map showing Europe. I have to do a little bit of scrolling here. So this map shows the political boundaries of Europe in 1640 AD, following the Peace of Nuremberg. And you can see like the Kingdom of Denmark, the Kingdom of Sweden, Sadom, Russia, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. We also have the Germanic area here like Saxony, Sicilia, Bohemia, Bavaria. Then we have Austria, Hungary, and so many other political boundaries as it was at that time. So here is where we are going to start off, and this is pre-Napoleonic War, and there you see the Ottoman Empire, and over to the left here we have all the city-states of what was before it became fully Italy. So there's the starting point with all the geographic boundaries, what they were known as at that specific time. Here we have another map. This is Europe in 1805 before the Battle of Austerlitz. And here we see the geographic boundaries shifted again. So we still have the Kingdom of Norway, the Kingdom of Sweden, we have the Empire of Russia, we have the Kingdom of Prussia now, and that was one of the major states among the Germanic tribes. And then another major state was Austria. And Austria was also linked to Hungary. We see the French Empire taking shape at this point in time, and this is where Napoleon comes into play. And we also see the Ottoman Empire still intact at that very moment. We see the Kingdom of Spain, the Kingdom of Portugal. So from the 1600s to 1800s, you see how some of the geographical boundaries have shifted, and we'll get more into that later. And then this is Europe post-World War I. A lot of these countries have disappeared. So we have Turkey now coming out of the Ottoman Empire. We have Italy in its full constitution. We have Romania, we have Hungary, we have Yugoslavia, we have Bulgaria, we see the size of Austria has shrunk. Then we have Switzerland coming into play, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Germany is now constituted as the German Empire due to the work of Otto von Bismarck on behalf of the Kaiser at the time. And we have Sweden, Norway, Latvia, Lithuania, East Prussia. So as you can see, post-World War I, this is how Europe was constituted. So after every successive conflict that was prior mentioned, starting with the Napoleonic Wars and then moving into the Crimean War, we see a shift taking place in geographic boundaries once those matters have concluded. And it doesn't matter if they were concluded amicably or not, it just caused a shift.
Before the conclusion of World War I, with the German Empire in shambles, plans were drawn up to divide the remnants of the Ottoman Empire between the victors. This is what the previous map, Europe, post-World War I, is reflecting because of the Sykes-Picot Agreement. Because of this agreement, most of the issues plaguing that region currently stemmed from this.
So here we have from Encyclopedia Britannica some details about the Sykes-Picot Agreement from 1916. So I'm just going to scroll a little bit here.
So it's a secret convention made during World War I between Great Britain and France with the assent of Imperial Russia.
Right, so you see the three major parties involved. Hence the reason why when conflict broke out in Syria, you saw Russia getting involved in the matter as well, along with the former French, along with the Great Britain empires.
For the dismemberment of the Ottoman Empire. The agreement led to the division of Turkish-held Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, and Palestine into various French and British administered areas. Negotiations were begun in November of 1915, and the final agreement took its name from the chief negotiators from Britain and France, Sir Mark Sykes and Francois-Georges Picot. Sergei Dmitrievich Sazonov, hope I didn't butcher that one, was also present to represent Russia, the third member of the Triple Entente.
Okay, so here you see how up to World War I and conclusion of World War I, how a lot more boundaries were subdivided because of agreements between major powers. And we know from understanding of the scripture there is more to it than just these people who are doing the divisions. Again, go back to Daniel's statue and the dream of Nebuchadnezzar. All of this is coming, is unfolding before us. So we have the three major powers, France, and France has been in the news with a lot of stuff, especially with what's going on in Europe, and that's one of the news grabs from the beginning. We also see Britain, who has controlled a lot of the habitable land for a very long time, and then we see Russia in the shadows. And when that whole situation kicked off in Syria with what was going on, and this is why Russia also got involved. It's not because of Assad, but it's because of this agreement. That's the unspoken part that nobody is saying out loud, because nobody is aware of all the details that would cause all these entities to return to that location to fight and to stake their claim to what they think they have a right to. Oops, let me just go back one. Okay, so now we have this map here post. This is after World War II. So now you see how a lot of the countries have been withdrawn again. So we have Ukraine popping up, we have Poland, we have Germany shrinking in size, we have Hungary now standing on its own, we have Romania, we have Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, Ukraine, the hot button issue right now. And just to sort of bring a little bit of light to the situation with Ukraine, if many of you saw that interview with President Vladimir Putin and Tucker Carlson, President Putin gave a very good history lesson at the very beginning and I'll advise you to at least listen to 30 minutes of that interview, because all of this is encapsulated in what he's saying about peoples, how they were moved, etc., and how it has caused the current situation to be unfolding in Ukraine. So this is not new. Hence the reason why I also included the Russian-Crimean War in the mix, because a lot of the issues from that war has not concluded. And now you see Turkey is all on its own, and then we have Syria, Iraq, Jordan, Iran too. A lot of these countries were built out of the Treaty of Sykes-Picot. And Egypt was also part of the Ottoman Empire, but they sort of broke off before World War I really took off, and they were a British protectorate.
Observe each map reflecting the region of the conflict post-war. The boundaries are redrawn and new geopolitical designations come into existence as the previous held name is slowly erased from our consciousness and eventually history.
And this is going to be revisited later, how this affects us today.
So likewise, skirmishes such as the Haitian Revolution, the Bolivarian Revolution of South America, the American Civil War, the Scramble for Africa, and continental wars therein, Afghanistan conflict starting with the British, then the Russians, and ending with the Americans, Vietnam, they all helped further a hidden agenda as the somewhat conclusion of each conflict brought about a new geopolitical disposition.
Right, so as we touched on Afghanistan, again, Afghanistan is not a new conflict. The British tried to subjugate Afghanistan, and I think the Russians also tried to subjugate Afghanistan before the British, and it did not work. These people, like, they were born to fight. And then when the British left, the Russians went back in. That didn't work out. And then Russia had to pull out, and America went back in, and you see how America had to pull out abruptly from Afghanistan under the current president, Joe Biden of the United States. And then we have Vietnam, etc., etc. So here's a map of pre-war boundaries in 1775 of North Continental, what we consider North America. And you see by 1783 how some of these boundaries have been quickly reshaped. So this is just with the North American situation. And then with Haiti, which is down to the bottom right, that situation in Haiti with Toussaint Louverture, the Haitian revolutionary president, that situation also popped off at the same time with the Napoleonic Wars. And unfortunately, I think most historians will consider the situation in Haiti to be the first defeat for Napoleon. When you have territories in far-flung areas, how easy it is for you to muster up forces to defend and to protect what you have overseas, and this is going to play into everything that is currently taking place as well. So here we have another map of so-called Americas again, with Latin America 1800 to 1830, and a lot of new territories were beginning to take shape with the Bolivarian revolution that took place. So Simón Bolívar, the president, well, he became the president of that territory, but he's mainly attributed to the country now known as Venezuela, went on a campaign to free a lot of these so-called countries from the grip of Spanish rule. It was successful. It caused a lot of fractionating of these countries into all of the little cities, well, country states that now exist. So here we keep seeing how conflict reshapes geographic boundaries. It also changes political name designations of people, etc.
The Berlin Conference precipitated the scramble for Africa, which still has implications for that region.
So here is Africa under the scramble for Africa, and as you can see, this is how the map looked. That whole blue area was French control, the brown is British, and then we have Belgium also getting a large chunk there, and many people who follow history will know of the sad situation that came out of the Belgian Congo with King Leopold of Belgium, what he did to the people in that area. So people may think Hitler was this bad, wicked person, but there are far more wicked people than him that existed. But because Hitler was not on the right side of history, he is going to be villainized, and other major, despots, whether they're a king or a dictator, may not get the same treatment like him. But that's just, it's neither here nor there. So this is how, under the scramble of Africa, how that landmass became divided. And the part with Egypt, that whole section was Egypt. It was no Anglo-Egyptian Sudan. That's just a made-up name. That whole section there was Egypt until King Farouk had to abdicate, and then that part split off and it became Sudan. And then recently Sudan and the southern part of Sudan had their conflicts, and another split was made calling it South Sudan. So again, through conflict and through the movements of people, a lot of these geographic boundaries keep getting redrawn, and it helps create more of the confusion that is currently being experienced. So this is a little excerpt about the Berlin Conference that caused that situation to happen in Africa.
So the Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885, also known as the Congo Conference, West Africa Conference, met on the 15th of November 1884, and after an adjournment concluded on the 26th of February 1885 with the signature of a general act regulating the European colonization and trade in Africa during the new imperialism period. The conference was organized by Otto von Bismarck, the first Chancellor of Germany, at the request of King Leopold II.
So you see how that situation with Germany keeps popping up. So Otto von Bismarck is a very interesting character. He was a very strong leader for Germany, and personally, I think a lot of countries need strong leaders like him, barring some of the negative things about him, but just looking at strong leadership, he has a very strong leadership. And then you see King Leopold, who got the Belgian Congo, is also instrumental in getting this going off.
The General Act of Berlin can be seen as the formalization of the scramble for Africa that was already in full swing. Some historians, however, warn against an overemphasis of its role in the colonial partitioning of Africa and draw attention to bilateral agreements concluded before and after the conference.
So in other words, they're telling you, don't pay attention to our shortcomings with this and all that has occurred as a result of this subdivision. Just look at it as trade and commerce and nothing else. It's like, don't pay attention to what's going on in my right hand, pay attention to what's going on everywhere else, because this is nothing that you think it is. But this precipitated that division within what is known as continental Africa.
With every redrawing of geopolitical borders, the name or the names of the land was also changed. Psalm 48:11, and their sepulchres are their houses forever, even their tabernacles to all generations. They have called their lands after their own names.
So here we see, even in the scripture, it talks about this situation about lands changing names. So this is not new. It's always ongoing as every generation comes about. Conflicts reshape geographic boundaries. The names get changed to something closely associated with these people, or a name that resonates with them, and identities become lost. Also, the Most High Yahuwah is not pleased with the dividing of his land.
So Joel 3:2, I will also gather all the Gentiles and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. I will plead with them there for my people and my heritage Israel, who have been dispersed among the Gentiles, and these Gentiles have divided my land.
So the commonly held view is that Joel 3 is referring to the division of Israel as it is currently constituted. And the many failed attempts in trying to hammer out a comprehensive peace agreement between these two warring peoples. The current and subsequent configuration of what is called Gaza, West Bank, these are controlled by the so-called Palestinians, and the state of Israel controlled by the so-called Jewish people. That is how it is currently constituted. And I want you to keep in mind that the land was previously divided by Yahuwah in ancient times because of the shortcomings of King Solomon and not because of current circumstances. It was already divided.
1 Kings 11:11 and verse 12. And Yahuwah said to Solomon, because it has been this with you, and you have not kept my commandments and my ordinances which I commanded you, I will surely rend your kingdom out of your hand and give it to your servant. Only in your days I will not do it for David your father's sake, but I will take it out of the hand of your son.
So when you read the account under Rehoboam, King Solomon's son, who took over from him, he was misguided in who to take counsel from, but at the end of the day, this came from Yah, and he made this happen. So Israel was already divided. It's not divided now. It has always been divided. So it's he that did that division. So there's no it's the whole entire earth that has been divided. Thus, in my view, Joel 3 is referring to the dividing of every habitable landmass currently under what we term Babylonian occupation, as Yahuwah has claimed ownership over everything he created and established.
Psalm 23:1, a psalm for David on the first day of the week. The earth is Yahuwah's, and the fullness thereof, the world and all that dwell in it.
And this is a recurrent theme. You can find it everywhere, but in the Torah itself, it's under Deuteronomy 10:14.
Behold, the heaven and the heaven of heavens belong to Yahuwah your Elohim, the earth and all things that are in it.
So he owns everything. Everything has his deed on it. He owns it, he claims it, nobody else does. And that's the reality. So these wicked entities have done the divisions outside of the will of Yah. And that also would include what's going on in that so-called place called Israel, but it was that land was already divided. But I know a lot of people within the Messianic space would look at it from another perspective, but that land has already been divided. So it's not a new situation. So additionally, Yahuwah divided the habitable lands and established peoples, tribes, nations according to his desires. This was established aforetime.
Deuteronomy 32:8 from the Septuagint. When the Most High divided the nations, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the nations according to the number of the angels of Yahuwah.
And as you can see in the Masoretic verses, the Septuagint, it says, according to the children of Israel.
And when the Most High divided to the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel. So observe that the LXX and the Masoretic differ about the divisions established, as the Septuagint states it's based on the angels of God. Other translations say sons of God. However, the Masoretic is basing it on the tribes of Israel. Keep in mind that there are 13 tribes of Israel, and it would stand to reason there should be only 13 nations, but this would contradict the table of nations in Genesis 10, where there's 70 nations. Babylon continues to keep the people confused and dismayed.
Now, there's a link at the very bottom there about Humanetics, that you can click the link once the presentation goes online, and you can read some opinions about whether it was divided based on the sons or angels of Yah, or based on the sons of Jacob, Israel. But we go with the Septuagint version,
sons of Elohim,
which makes more perfect sense, and most biblical scholars agree with that opinion. Mm-hmm. So we are revisiting what all of this is going to lead up to, and this is consequences. We're going to have major consequences, and it's already brewing.
There are consequences, intended or unintended, to every action, good or bad, that the perpetrators have effected. Unfortunately, the bad ones have overshadowed the good with the reconfiguration of society in the image and likeness of the rulers of this earth, as it was before the destruction of the Tower of Babel or Babylon. Genesis 11:1-9. Everything being done is in defiance of Yahuwah. Their defiance has caused.
So we're going to look at some of the things that all of this has caused, that is now unfolding, well, now causing a new set of circumstances to arise in our current society, our current generation. So the first is changed geographic borders.
Difficult to determine biblical place names to untangle prophetic riddles.
And that's intentional, so we don't know what some of these lands are truly called, but it's named by these people who now are in control.
Communities and locations dissolve into unspoken history and become forgotten.
So most of you out there who don't follow history or take the time out to look into things would not know about the Lithuanian, Polish Empire and all these other geopolitical designations that existed at one point in time.
Aggrieved persons will hold animosity as they have incurred losses of land, wealth, and other resources due to confiscation by perceived victors. The survivors of the losing faction will ensure that their successive generations will remember and act at an appropriate time to avenge the loss. Hence the reason the men of value who survive are made eunuchs by the victors to ensure there is no payback from their legacy and to utilize their talents and skills.
And you get into Daniel 1, the first chapter of Daniel 1 to 3, and that sort of gives a backdrop to that, along with Jeremiah chapter 36.
Autonomous new states with improperly defined geopolitical borders have disputes which lead to localized conflicts for land and resources.
So we had a situation with Venezuela and Guyana recently about territories. I don't think it was about old border. I think it's something else that they were fighting over, but that's a topic for another time. But that's a most recent conflict based out of the division of so-called South and Latin America that still has not been concluded. So that's the first major issue with consequences, changing geographic borders. Next is an enormous death toll.
Loss of life is one of the byproduct of war. The loss of human potential cannot be quantified. The impact is felt in the successive generations as it takes time for the population to recover and human potential to catch up.
So those wars that we mentioned, to the left is the specific war. In the middle is the amount of souls that died as a result of each of those conflicts. And then off to the right are the belligerents or the major powers that engaged in these conflicts. So we're not going to read through all of that. Here on Wikipedia, you can visit the link, and it gives a very comprehensive listing of a lot of conflicts and their perceived casualties from each war. It's a lot, and if you were to quantify the amount of souls that perished or died in each of those conflicts, it's a lot of human potential that we will never ever recover from. So just take time out to take a look at this list and do a quick math to see how much people did not make it to their full potential over each generation. So the next situation from consequences that occurred was changed tribal and national identities.
Tribal identities are lost to many people and reclassified with geopolitical designation based on their new country name due to the newly established borders. These classified identities are confusing. Some examples?
So we have African American, doesn't make sense, but it exists. Indo-Chinese, Irish African, Irish American, Palestinian, Canadian, Afro-Caribbean, Indo-Caribbean. Who are we truly? Very confusing.
These new identities are intended to create a cohesion outside of tribal identity, with the national identity taking precedent. It is not that easy to erase some tribal identities. Tribal affinities are difficult to break in some cultures and states. So-called Native Americans, indigenous peoples, typically there is pushback on this agenda.
So here in North America, Native Americans hold on for dear life to their identity. They're not giving it up. And you would see from time to time in the news, political issues regarding identity and land and so many other things from the colonization of so-called Americas.
The reconstitution of society. The society is structured along ideological concepts such as gender, etc. No society is homogeneous. Forced acceptance to toxic ideologies. Mixing of DNA makes it difficult to keep a strong tribal cohesion and affiliation.
So no society is homogeneous, meaning no society is mostly the same. Some of the most homogeneous societies out here is the Japanese society, because they don't typically mix, and they keep it that way. And to some extent, the Chinese and some of those Asian populations, they have resisted a lot of mixing over each successive generation. Hence the reason why their tribal cohesion is very strong compared to a lot of the so-called Western countries, where mixing has always been encouraged. So now, for some people, the identity is a big issue because of how things are now constituted.
Voluntary and forced migration. The house of Israel and Judah were taken into exile, captivity, bondage because of our wickedness in giving Yahweh the finger. These conflicts caused the involuntary migration of people post-conflict, moves for food, water, security, and shelter in places where it's stable and available.
Right, so barring the house of Israel's situation, a lot of the other tribes have been in perpetual motion, because once their society becomes disrupted, everything within that society is also disrupted. So access to food becomes disrupted, water becomes disrupted, things are no longer safe, there's no way to rest your head from all the elements, and for safety as well, and a lot of unsavory things tend to happen. So because of an unstable situation, people would move to somewhere where they think they're going to get some semblance of security and peace. So hence, people will keep moving. It's still happening. Turn on the news, migrants, they're moving. Problems everywhere.
Changed governance structure. Feudalism was replaced along with tribal forms of governance. Democracy in any form is a failure. Republic, parliamentary, congressional, monarch, it only gives the illusion of free choice. Dictatorships were encouraged in some states to maintain tight control over certain collectives of people. All of these dictatorships were brutal against the people and caused involuntary migrations. The new forms of governance is only to keep society divided. A divided society makes it difficult to replace the corrupt rulers. Contrived history and facts. The victors get to embellish the history and facts of the matter. A very toxic social soup has been cooked up over time that is spilling over.
So that last one about who gets to write the history. If you're a loser, your history doesn't matter. And even going back to the Tucker Carlson interview with President Putin, he even alluded to that as well, talking about how, he doesn't have the infrastructure to really run an effective propaganda campaign. But that's all a lot of history is, propaganda. If you win, you get to write the history.
No society is totally homogeneous. This leads to divided loyalties and inner conflicts. Here are 4 examples.
Right, so
example number 1.
Before we get down to the examples, Super D, what is saying here, who are you going to be loyal to when things get to the point where it's all out, a brawl between different fractions and factions? So here are some of examples we're going to look into that would help bring some cohesion to everything that we are speaking about here in this presentation.
So Charles Edward, Duke of Albany, former UK, Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, German Empire. Example 2, Japanese internment camp, World War II. Example 3, Gonzalo Lira, Chilean American, Alberto Fujimori, Japanese Peruvian, Nidal Hassan, Palestinian American. And example 4, the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak.
So we're going to look at these 4 examples here and how these examples are still ongoing with a lot of people currently in this generation. So the example 1 is Charles Edward, Duke of Albany, the former, and he was the last Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha under the German Empire. Here's a little history about him out of Wikipedia.
So he was the last sovereign Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, reigning from July 30th, 1900 to the 14th of November, 1918, and was later a Nazi Party politician. His parents were Prince Leopold, Duke of Albany, and Princess Helen of Waldeck and Pyrmont. His paternal grandparents were Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom and Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. Charles Edward's father died before Charles Edward's birth, having suffered from hemophilia. He was brought up as a British prince. He was a sickly child who developed a close relationship with his grandmother and his only sibling, Alice. He was privately educated, lastly, at Eton College.
The important part here?
In 1899, Charles Edward was selected to succeed to the throne of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, a state of the German Empire, because he was deemed young enough to be re-educated as a German. He moved to Germany at the age of 15 between 1899 and...
Give me a sec, let me just move this up.
1905. And he was put through various forms of education guided by his cousin, German Emperor Wilhelm II. He ascended...
Okay. That's where we're going to conclude this.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is a little bit about his grandmother, Queen Victoria.
Queen of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland from the 20th of June 1837 until her death in 1901. Her reign of 63 years and 216 days, which was longer than any of her predecessors, is known as the Victorian era. It was a period of industrial, political, scientific, and military change within the United Kingdom.
Now pay attention to that last part. And military change. These were war people, and they've always been waging war.
And was marked by a great expansion of the British Empire. In 1876, the British Parliament voted to grant her the additional title of Empress of India.
Right, so there we have. Okay, you can read that little part about her father.
So she was the daughter of Prince Edward, Duke of Kent and Strathearn, the fourth son of King George III, and Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saffield.
And just to let you know, Saxe-Coburg-Saffield was then renamed Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. So her and her husband Prince Albert were close cousins. So the Duke, because of his affiliations with the German Empire, not because he wanted to, but he was forced to, lost his British titles. And they had to come up with this Titles Deprivation Act of 1917 to strip him of all titles related to his British inheritance. And also, the Kaiser Wilhelm II also had British titles as well, because his grandmother was also Queen Victoria. Both these guys, Prince Edward and the Kaiser Wilhelm II, were first cousins because of their respective mother and father.
The Titles Deprivation Act of 1917 is an act of Parliament of the United Kingdom which authorized enemies of the United Kingdom during the First World War to be deprived of their British peerages and royal titles. The British royal family was closely related to many of the royal and princely families of Germany. In particular, while Victoria became queen in 1837, the Kingdom of Hanover, which had been in personal union with the British Crown for over a century, passed to her uncle, the Duke of Cumberland, who also retained his British titles and princely rank. Similarly, Queen Victoria married Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, whose German titles passed eventually to the descendants of their youngest son, Leopold, Duke of Albany. Thus, during World War I, both Charles Edward, Duke of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha...
I'm going to scroll this a little bit.
And Ernest Augustus, former Crown Prince of Hanover, were British princes and dukes, even while they were also officers in the German army, as was the latter's son, Ernest Augustus, Duke of Brunswick, who also held British princely rank.
Okay, so they were stripped of their titles from the British Empire, and they were left hanging because of unfortunate circumstances that originated in their recent past.
Hence the name change of the British sovereign from Saxe-Coburg-Gotha to Windsor. This is to deflect from their German roots to a proper English heritage.
Right, so they were part of the royal house of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, but they wanted not to look too German in quotes. So they had a big conflict during World War I as well as World War II. So the king at the time thought it best to change their family name from Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, and they settled on Windsor. And even today, with the current sovereign on the throne, if he was to take up a family title, it would be Mountbatten Windsor, but that's a history you can go look into in your own time, just to see how names and everything keeps changing and juggling every moment. So this video here, it's not going to play, but you can look for it under the name The Disturbing Story of the Nazi Royal, Hitler's Favorite Royal, Real Royalty. And you can see his face there. I call it, this is the face of consequence. Unfortunately for him, he was too young to make a decision on his own. The decision was made by his grandmother for him to take up the position of Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, and his cousin, who was the Emperor of Germany, decided to go to war because of the situation with Duke Ferdinand when he was assassinated and kicked off World War I. So him being a British subject as well and part of the British royal family, was also part of the German royal infrastructure. And he had a big conflict because it's either he sides with Britain or he sides with Germany. And he decided, well, not that he decided, but his sovereign, which was the Kaiser, to kind of make him not feel too guilty, had him fight on the Eastern Front in the Ottoman Empire so that he wouldn't have to fight his family on the British side of the conflict. So this video, the link would also be in the presentation. You can go and get some more insight. But as I said, this is the face of consequence when you have divided loyalties. Who are you going to sit down and have camaraderie with? And this was his biggest problem, even though it was not his fault entirely. So now we're on to example 2, the Japanese internment camps of World War II. And here's a nice picture depicting how these internment camps look, and you might kind of relate them to modern day FEMA camps. So don't let that be lost on you. So here is from the Canadian Encyclopedia, a little bit about the Canadian involvement in these Japanese internment camps during World War II.
The forcible expulsion and confinement of Japanese Canadians during the Second World War is one of the most tragic sets of events in Canada's history. Some 21,000 Japanese Canadians were taken from their homes in Canada's west coast without any charge or due process. Beginning the 24th of February 1942, around 12,000 of them were exiled to remote areas of BC and elsewhere. The federal government stripped them of their property and pressured many of them to accept mass deportation after the war. Those who remained were not allowed to return to the West Coast until April of 1949. In 1988, the federal government officially apologized for its treatment of Japanese Canadians. A redress payment of $21,000 was made to each survivor, and more than $12 million was allocated to a community fund and human rights project.
So that $21,000 is called reparations. It's just a fancy name. They're calling it redress payment. It's reparations for what was done. These Japanese, so-called Japanese people were Canadian citizens, and because Canada and America were at war with Japan, can you trust these people to side with you, or are they going to side with the ancestral people? And this is why things are going to get very complex for a lot of people. So now here is the same situation, but from the United States side of things. And this is from Encyclopedia Britannica.
The Japanese-American internment, the forced relocation by the U.S. government of thousands of Japanese Americans to detention camps during World War II. That action was the culmination of the federal government's long history of racist and discriminatory treatment of Asian immigrants and their descendants that had begun with restricted immigration policies in the late 1800s.
So not because you're in a country where you were born and raised means to say everything is afforded to you immediately. There are so many complex issues that would cause this to happen, and in times of war, it doesn't matter how American or Canadian you are, things are going to boil down between who you are and who you are not, and this is where we're heading. So example number 3 is with these 3 fellows here. The first one to the right is Gonzalo, a so-called Chilean American. The second one is Alberto Fujimori. He was the president of Peru. He is what is classed as Japanese Peruvian. And then we have Nidal Hassan, who is considered a Palestinian American. So here is a little excerpt about Gonzalo coming from the Helsinki Times. So it's titled The Tragic and End of Gonzalo Lira, a Voice Silenced in Ukraine.
Gonzalo Lira, a Chilean-American war commentator known for his critical views on the Zelensky regime and the Russia-Ukraine conflict, passed away on January 11, 2024, in a hospital in Kharkiv, Ukraine. Lira's death followed an 8-month imprisonment on charges of justifying Russia's military actions in Ukraine, sparking international controversy and raising questions about freedom of speech and human rights during wartime.
And just a little note, nobody has freedom. We have free reign, we don't have freedom. So this guy was bogged down in Ukraine. He is considered an American, even though he has the so-called Chilean designation attached to his so-called nationality. And he found himself on the wrong side of the war as it relates to the conflict with who, well, I wouldn't say he was supporting Russia, but he was just stating facts that made it look as though Russia was not doing the things that the Western media claimed that Russia was doing. So he was in Ukraine reporting on the conflict, and he was captured, and no matter how much people reached out to the State Department in the US, because of his so-called support of Russia, they left him out to dry, and his American citizenship did diddly squat for him. So he ended up dying in custody, and nobody's taking the time out to investigate his death. But a Russian opposition leader just died, and oh my gosh, the outrage that is here. Again, I don't really care about who is fighting where. The whole point is just to see how hypocrisy and all these circumstances are coming together to make things very uncomfortable, leading to very unpleasant consequences. So example 2 is Alberto Fujimori.
So he's a Peruvian former politician, professor, and engineer who served as president of Peru from July 1990 until November 2000. Through de facto leadership was reportedly held by Vladimiro Montesinos, the then head of the National Intelligence Service. Frequently described as a dictator, he remains a controversial figure in Peruvian politics. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison for human rights abuses during his presidency, but was released in December of 2023 following an order by the Constitutional Court of Peru.
Okay, so President Fujimori, he got himself entangled in some serious situations in his so-called native Peru, and when these allegations caught up to him, he fled to Japan, and because of the laws in Japan, he could not have been extradited back to Peru to face trial for those allegations that were leveled against him. So he was running free for a while until he returned to South America, to Chile, and the Peruvian government executed a warrant, an international warrant for his arrest while he was in Chile, and he was brought back to Peru to face those charges. So again, we see a situation where a person's nationality has shielded them from, getting, well, not just nationality, but the ethnic background as well, help them to evade persecution in their country of birth. And again, all of these things are going to work together to cause more problems for people of mixed nationalities. So that's just another example. And then the last example here, which should come close to home.
Nidal Malik Hassan, a Palestinian-American former United States Army major, physician, and mass murderer convicted of killing 13 people and injuring more than 30 others in the Fort Hood mass shooting on the 5th of November 2009. Hassan, an Army Medical Corps psychiatrist, admitted to the shootings at his court-martial in August of 2013.
So here we have a situation where the so-called Palestinian American is in the military infrastructure within the United States. So you would want to think that his loyalties are going to be to the country that he's a citizen of and part of the military. But this was not the case. And there are many other soldiers who are like him that share his sentiments, but they're keeping their mouths shut. If something was to pop off at this very moment, how are these people going to pivot as it relates to the ethnicity, the nationality, and everything else, the religion, and everything else? They are going to have conflict, and the sooner they work out the conflict, the better for them. But it's not going to bode well for anyone because of all these intermixing and confusion of everything in between. So now we're on to example 4, the current UK Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. So Rishi Sunak, this article is from his appointment back in October of 2022.
So Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister of the United Kingdom on Tuesday after meeting with King Charles III at Buckingham Palace. The 42-year-old former Treasury chief is the country's third premier in under 2 months, the youngest leader since 1812 and the first person of color to serve in the role. He is of Indian heritage and Hindu faith.
Keep that in mind, Indian heritage of Hindu faith. Right, we can end this one here, but he's the current Prime Minister of the UK, and there are many controversies that he is dealing with, such as the repatriation of migrants from, instead of back to their home countries, into Rwanda, Africa. That didn't go well for him. A lot of independent British media are very upset with the state of affairs in the UK, but we will highlight this further in the presentation. And here's one last article pertaining to India-Russia reaffirming friendship, discussing growing trade and strategic ties. And keep in mind who the Prime Minister of the UK is, and his so-called ancestral country, which is India, has always had traditional alliance with Russia. So here's a little excerpt talking about that.
India and Russia Wednesday reaffirmed their strong friendship and discussed deepening trade and strategic ties during a visit to Moscow by Indian External Affairs Minister, I'm not going to even try, said at a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Wednesday that the two countries have made progress in trade which now exceeds $50 billion. Let me keep going.
Jaishankar said at a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Wednesday that the two countries have, in quotes, made progress in trade, which now exceeds $50 billion. So here we see they are not severing the ties, even though America for many years have tried to get a wedge between Russia and India. Now let's go back to the days of Indira Gandhi. We can even go further back with when India was partitioned. I didn't mention it in terms of some of the things with migration of peoples, but when the British lost control of India, India was divided into 3 partitions. The main India that currently still exists, and then east of India, which is now called Pakistan, and west of India, which was called West Pakistan, I think it was. So Pakistan was sort of 2 enclaves with India smushed in between. And when the last viceroy was King Charles, one of King Charles's uncle, Lord Mountbatten, he oversaw the partition of India that caused a mass migration of peoples, not based on ethnicity, but based on religious ideology, with the Hindus staying in predominantly India, and those who have Muslim persuasion moving to Pakistan and East Pakistan or West Pakistan. The other Pakistan ended up having a civil war, which caused them to secede from the other Pakistan, coming Bangladesh as we now know it today. And not only that, but the new Pakistan that came out of that split with India took a Western approach to their sort of geopolitics. So they were closely affiliated with the US than the West, whereas India was closely associated with Russia. And again, we see how things become divided and very convoluted as new divisions evolve and new powers take over. So where are things heading?
In our recent history, ISIS triggered a wave of forced migration from Syria and Iraq into Europe when they declared themselves the new caliphate, in their attempt to establish itself as a new governing authority in those areas. Economic hardships in African states also did the same, as people are heading to Europe thinking they can achieve a better economic reality. States in Africa have been deliberately kept in disorganization as bad actors or leaders have been supported by the Western European powers to subjugate their people, furthermore to maintain control over their acquired lands. Also, Latin America has seen people displaced because of despot regimes that have oppressed the people. A person can only take so much. Then, the Ukraine conflict also caused forced migration to states in the Western Alliance, not forgetting the many other conflicts globally that have caused the forced migration of people of different ethnic and national identities to transition to locations of perceived safety. In addition, the immigrant border crisis in the U.S. that has become critical and talk of civil war is brewing because of the U.S. federal government trying to act against Texas. Unfortunately, in every successive generation, social stumbling blocks have been deliberately put in place to reshape the construct of society earth-wide. When the bullets do begin to fly, where does society stand regarding their loyalties and support? As highlighted with the Japanese during World War II in the U.S. and Canada, they were corralled into concentration camps because they were not trusted to support the West, given Japan fought on the side of Hitler's army, Germany. We also saw how a member of the British royal family has been excommunicated from the royal house because of his begrudging support during World War I to his adopted home. People are going to be conflicted. Dividing loyalties in the Western Alliance are going to lead many people to FEMA and detention camps for their dissent. The Ukraine and Israel-Palestinian conflicts have demonstrated how tribal affiliations and ideological issues go against the Western positions held by the governing authorities. Because of the current ethnic, religious, ideological, and social makeup of most Western states, there's going to be divided loyalty and many are going to find themselves trapped.
Yes, very trapped. So, an example, I'm a Russian citizen, a former Russian citizen living here to a generation, and war with Russia breaks out. How are these people going to be treated as it relates to their former land of their heritage? It's going to be problems. And don't say, oh, we're not going to do that. It's going to happen again. It's not going to be brushed. It's going to happen again because these people are not going to be trusted. So anyone who is on the opposite side of the conflict, living in a country not of their heritage, they are going to be looked upon with suspicion. And it's going to lead to other unfortunate circumstances happening, and we saw that with Gonzalo Lira when he was in the Ukraine.
Past conflicts were straightforward as they are based on nationalistic interest with fellow combatants strategically aligned to each other. Over time, allegiances shifted as opposing social orders emerged which counter each other.
So here is with the Ottoman Empire. During the Ukraine conflict, the Ottoman Empire was in alliance with the Western powers, but during World War II, they were in alliance with the German Empire, and the Russians were in alliance with the Western power. So allegiances would shift, and it keeps shifting, and it will always happen. That's the reality, and it creates more problems.
In a polarized society, conflict will emerge. With tensions at an all-time high, the following can and will potentially occur. So civil war and an unrest, and global war.
So we're going to look at these two things, what it could cause. So scenario one is civil war, and these things listed are some of the issues happening in different countries that is causing friction within that society.
Grooming gangs and youth violence in the UK, Brexit, French worker protest, migrants living in ghettos in France, farmer protest in mainland Europe, Sweden's migrant rape crisis, religion, trucker convoy discord, Canada and the US border crisis, worldwide political discord, economic disparity. What side do I choose? Who do I support? Should I protest? How are the authorities going to deal with this unrest? Am I going to be placed in a detention or fuming camp? Can I trust family, friends, acquaintances? If I'm in the armed services deployed in a foreign country and a civil war breaks out, What are the repercussions?
Right, so in that case, I am from Texas in deployed foreign and another one is from Oklahoma, and these two states find themselves at opposite sides of the Civil War. Who are we going to pivot and support? It's going to be very, very difficult to make that pivot. Scenario 2, global war.
What would happen if I'm of Chinese, East Indian, Russia, etc. nationalistic heritage and Western power at war against these countries? I'm serving in the armed forces and I'm of an opposing nationality. What does that mean for me? I'm of another so-called nationality. How war with my ancestral homeland is going to affect me in my current home. So Exodus 1:8-10. And there arose up another king over Egypt, who knew not Joseph. And he said to his nation, Behold, the race of the children of Israel is a great multitude, and is stronger than we. Come then, let us deal craftily with them, lest at any time they be increased. And whensoever war shall happen to us, these also shall be added to our enemies, and having prevailed against us in war, they will depart out of the land.
So here we have an example with Israel when they were in Egypt, when they went down there because of the food situation during a drought, and a few generations later they were in a pickle. The Egyptians say, hey, these people are not of us, and it's going to happen again. And this is a classic example of it happening before. So scenario 3 is a combination of everything happening. No state can deal with both domestic and foreign conflicts at the same time. The Western alliances have domestic issues at their back door, while facing the bear, which is Russia, who seems to have a stable domestic front. Coupled with a mostly homogeneous society, the confidence of the leadership in that part of the world means one less headache to pay attention to. So Russia don't have those headaches to think about. They have other headaches. But there can be a combination of scenario 1 and 2 happening all at once, which would lead this to which led this to happening to Neo Babylon. This happened before. So here in Jeremiah 51 in the Masoretic and 28 in the Septuagint, 5-8.
For Israel and Judah have not been forsaken of their Elohim, of Yahweh Almighty, whereas their land was filled with iniquity against the holy things of Israel. Flee you out of the midst of Babylon, and deliver everyone his soul, and be not overthrown in her iniquity, for it is the time of her retribution from Yahweh. He is rendering to her a recompense. Babylon has been a golden cup in Yahweh's hand, causing all the earth to be drunken. The nations have drunk of her wine, therefore they were shaken. And Babylon is fallen suddenly, and is broken to pieces. Lament for her, take balm for her deadly wound, if by any means she may be healed.
So I'll just repeat that statement again. A combination of scenario 1 plus 2 will lead to this happening in Neo Babylon. And we consider the Western powers Neo Babylon. And we can get some insight from many other people who has that same view as well, that the West is the New Babylon. But it's not really the New Babylon. It's just a term to sort of highlight where we're currently at and what is still in control over the entire world society. So there's a saying, diversity is our strength, but I disagree. Diversity is not our strength. Nations should adopt the root doctrine if they really want to make things work. But I know it's not going to happen, but this is a situation from root.
And Naomi said to Ruth, Behold, your sister-in-law has returned to her people and to her gods. Now you turn also after your sister-in-law. And Ruth said, Entreat me not to leave you, or to return from following you, for whithersoever you go, I will go, and wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your Elohim my Elohim. And wherever you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. Yahweh, do so to me, and more also if I leave you, for death only shall divide between me and you. And Naomi, seeing that she was determined to go with her, ceased to speak to her any more.
So if you're migrating from country A to country B, this is how it's supposed to be. Everything about that country is supposed to adopt. There should be no difference, no deviation, nothing. But again, we have diversity, and it's also part of the problem that is leading up to all these conflicts that's going on. So we'll read, to finish things off, these 3 passages of scripture, because eventually Yah is going to be the one shaking things up. So the first is from Isaiah chapter 24, verses 8-10.
Behold, Yahweh is about to lay waste the world, and will make it desolate, and will lay bare the surface of it, and scatter them that dwell therein. And the people shall be as the priest, and the servant as the master, and the maid as the mistress. The buyer shall be as the seller, the lender as the borrower, and the debtor as his creditor.
So this is, everybody's going to be equal. Doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, everybody's going to be affected by this. Just keep that in mind.
The earth shall be completely laid waste, and the earth shall be utterly spoiled, for the mouth of Yahweh has spoken these things. The earth mourns, and the world is ruined. The lofty ones of the earth are mourning, and she has sinned by reason of her inhabitants, because they have transgressed the law, and changed the ordinance, even the everlasting covenant. Therefore a curse shall consume the earth, because the inhabitants thereof have sinned. Therefore the dwellers in the earth shall be poor, and few men shall be left.
So it's really going to be an upheaval. Nobody is going to be left untouched.
The wine shall mourn, the vine shall mourn, all the merry-hearted shall sigh. The mirth of timbrels has ceased.
So that wine mourning and everything mourning is lack of it. So there's going to be famine.
The sound of the harp has ceased. They are ashamed. They have not drunk wine. Strong drink has become bitter to them that drink it. All the city has become desolate. One shall shut his house so that none shall enter. There is a howling for the wine everywhere. All the mirth of the land has ceased. All the mirth of the land has departed. And cities shall be left desolate, and houses being left shall fall to ruin. All this shall be in the land in the midst of the nations, as if one should strip an olive tree. So shall they strip them. But when the vintage is done, these shall cry aloud, and they that are left on the land shall rejoice together in the glory of Yahweh. The water of the sea shall be troubled. Therefore shall the glory of Yahweh be in the isles of the sea. The name of Yahweh shall be glorious. O Yahweh Elohim of Israel, from the ends of the earth we have heard wonderful things, and there is hope to the godly. But they shall say, Woe to the despisers that despise the law. Fear and a pit and a snare are upon you that dwell on the earth. And it shall come to pass that he that flees from the fear shall fall into the pit, and he that comes up out of the pit shall be caught by the snare. For windows have been opened in heaven, and the foundations of the earth shall be shaken. The earth shall be utterly confounded, and the earth shall be completely perplexed. It reels as a drunkard and one oppressed with wine. And the earth shall be shaken as a storehouse of fruits, for iniquity has prevailed upon it. And it shall fall, and shall not be able to rise. And Yahweh shall bring his hand upon the host of heaven, and upon the kings of the earth, and they shall gather the multitude thereof into prisons, and they shall shut them into a stronghold. After many generations they shall be visited. And the brick shall decay, and the wall shall fall, and Yahweh shall reign from out of Zion and out of Jerusalem, and shall be glorified before his elders.
So nobody's escaping this. There's no rapture for you to rapture away to. That's not going to happen. Everybody's going to feel the sting of this. So just keep that in mind for those who think there's going to be some rapture that's going to take them away from all of this. Everybody's going to be affected by this. Nobody's exempt. So this one is from Jeremiah chapter 32 in the Septuagint and 25 in the Masoretic.
Thus says Yahweh Elohim of Israel, Take the cup of this unmixed wine from my hand, and you shall cause all the nations to drink to whom I send you. And they shall drink and vomit and be mad because of the sword which I send among them.
So there's going to be war. It's coming.
So I took the cup out of Yahweh's hand and caused the nations to whom Yahweh sent me to drink, Jerusalem and the cities of Judah and the kings of Judah and his princes, to make them a desert place, a desolation and a hissing.
So it begins at the house and it ends abroad.
And Pharaoh king of Egypt and his servants and his nobles and all his people and all the mingled people and all the kings of the Philistines and Ashkelon and Gaza and Acharon and the remnant of Azotus and Idumea and the land of Moab and the children of Ammon, and the kings of Tyre, and the kings of Sidon, and the kings in the country beyond the sea.
So that's everybody.
And Dedan, and Teman, and Raz, and every one that is shaved round about the face, and all the mingled people lodging in the wilderness, and all the kings of Elam, and all the kings of the Persians, and all the kings from the north, the far and the near, each one with his brother, and all the kingdoms which are on the face of the earth. You shall say to them, Thus says Yahweh Almighty, You drink, you be drunk, and you shall vomit, and shall fall, and shall in no wise rise, because of the sword which I send among you. And it shall come to pass, when they refuse to take the cup out of your hand to drink it, that you shall say, Thus says Yahweh, you shall surely drink. For I am beginning to afflict the city whereon my name is called, and you shall by no means be held guiltless. For I am calling a sword upon all that dwell upon the earth. And you shall prophesy against them these words, and you shall say, Yahweh shall speak from on high from his sanctuary. He will utter his voice. He will pronounce a declaration on his place, and these shall answer like men gathering grapes, and destruction is coming on them that dwell on the earth, even upon the extreme part of the earth. For Yahuwah has a controversy with the nations. He's pleading with all flesh, and the ungodly are given to the sword, says Yahuwah. Thus says Yahuwah, behold, evils are proceeding from nation to nation, and a great whirlwind goes forth from the end of the earth. And the slain of Yahuwah shall be in the day of Yahuwah from one end of the earth even to the other end of the earth. They shall not be buried. They shall be as dung on the face of the earth. Howl, you shepherds, and cry, and lament, you rams of the flock, for your days have been completed for slaughter, and you shall fall as the choice rams, and flight shall perish from the shepherds, and safety from the rams of the flock. A voice of the crying of the shepherds, and a moaning of the sheep and the rams, for Yahuwah has destroyed their pastures, and the peaceable abodes that remain shall be destroyed before the fierceness of my anger. He has forsaken his lair as a lion, for the land is become desolate before the great sword.
Again, Yahweh is going to make this more than we can imagine, and we can only hope to trust in him to see us through it. And the last one is from Amos chapter 9, 1-15.
I saw Yahweh standing on the altar, and he said, Smite the mercy seat, and the porch shall be shaken, and cut through into the heads of all, and I will slay the remnant of them with the sword. No one of them fleeing shall escape, and no one of them striving to save himself shall be delivered. Though they hid themselves in hell, hence my hand dragged them forth, and though they go to heaven, thence will I bring them down. If they hide themselves in the top of Carmel, thence I will search them out and take them. And if they should go down from my presence into the depths of the sea, there will I command the serpent, and he shall bite them.
So just an interjection here. These places are locations where those hidden hands currently find themselves situated, and Yah is going everywhere. So your concept of heaven and hell is supposed to change, hopefully.
And if they should go into captivity before the face of their enemies, there will I command the sword, and it shall slay them. And I will set my eyes against them for evil and not for good. And Yahuwah Elohim Almighty is he that takes hold of the land and causes it to shake, and all that inhabit it shall mourn, and its destruction shall go up as a river, and shall descend as the river of Egypt. It is he that builds his ascent up to the sky, and establishes his promise on the earth, who calls the water of the sea, and pours it out on the face of the earth. Yahuwah Almighty is his name. Are you not to me as the sons of the Ethiopians, O children of Israel? Says Yahuwah. Did I not bring Israel up out of the land of Egypt, and the Philistines from Cappadocia, and the Syrians out of the deep? Behold, the eyes of Yahuwah Elohim are upon the kingdom of sinners, and I will cut it off from the face of the earth. Only I will not utterly cut off the house of Jacob, says Yahuwah. For I will give commandment, and sift the house of Israel among the Gentiles, as corn is sifted in a sieve, and yet a fragment shall not in any wise fall upon the earth. All the sinners of my people shall die by the sword, who say, Calamity shall certainly not draw near, nor come upon us. In that day I will raise up the tabernacle of David that is fallen, and will rebuild the ruins of it, and will set up the parts thereof that have been broken down, and will build it up as in the ancient days, that the remnant of men, and all the Gentiles upon whom my name is called, may earnestly seek me, says Yahuwah, who does all these things. Behold, the days come, says Yahuwah, when the harvest shall overtake the vintage, and the grapes shall ripen at seed time, and the mountains shall drop sweet wine, and all the hills shall be planted. And I will turn the captivity of my people Israel, and they shall rebuild the ruined cities, and shall inhabit them, and they shall plant vineyards, and shall drink the wine from them, and they shall form gardens, and eat the fruit of them. And I will plant them on their land, and they shall no more be plucked up from the land which I have given them, says Yahuwah Elohim Almighty.
So this is the fate for Israel. Once all of this concludes, they're going to be restored. But it's going to be very bitter before we get to that time, and we're heading into that bitterness right now with everything that is coming to its fruition. So now many are distracted with the upcoming solar eclipse, thinking that would lead to a rapture of the church. That's one opinion. Disappointment would lead to disillusion, and many do not want to accept that hard times cannot be avoided. There is going to be hard times. Then the migrant crisis have not worked out wherever it has been encouraged. So anywhere migrant has been scattered, it has not worked out. Some of the migrants have been involved in illegal acts warranting cause for their removals, whether it's Sweden with rapes, whether it's the US with thefts, murder, etc. Because of repeated poor decisions by elected officials, many people may take matters into their own hands. Also, the government will mistrust segments of their population and may not want to take primitive preemptive action to avoid unrest. This would lead to unrest, all of this happening. For the 13 and those called by Yahuwah's name, it is necessary to abide by his instructions, and the promise is we will be sheltered under his wings. He is the only one that will navigate us through the evil and wickedness that is upon us. And here is Psalm chapter 91 to help with that encouragement.
Praise of a song by David. He that dwells in the help of the highest shall sojourn under the shelter of the Elohim of heaven. He shall say to Yahuwah, You are my helper, my refuge, my Elohim, I will hope in him. For he shall deliver you from the snare of the hunters, from every troublesome matter. He shall overshadow you with his shoulders, and you shall trust under his wings. His truth shall cover you with a shield. You shall not be afraid of terror by night, nor of the arrow flying by day, nor of the evil thing that walks in darkness, nor of calamity and the evil spirit at noonday. 1,000 shall fall at your side, and 10,000 at your right hand, but it shall not come nigh you. Only with your eyes you shall observe and see the reward of sinners. For you, O Yahuwah, are my hope. You, my soul, have made the Most High your refuge. No evil shall come upon you, and no scourge shall draw nigh to your dwelling. For he shall give his angels charge concerning you, to keep you in all your ways. They shall bear you up on their hands, lest at any time you dash your foot against a stone. You shall tread on the asp and basilisk, and you shall trample on the lion and dragon. For he has hoped in me, and I, Yahuwah, will deliver him. I will protect him, because he has known my name. He shall call upon me, and I will hearken to him. I am with him in affliction, and I will deliver him and glorify him. I will satisfy him with length of days, and show him my salvation.
So that salvation, we're going to be taken to a place of safety. Back to the video in the cracked window. How do you identify at this moment? Are you of the nationality in the land of your domicile, or do you identify differently in the land of your habitation? Because of the current distribution of society, there is going to be division and confusion of faith. When the pent-up animosity explodes, and everybody have animosity and anguish and so many things pent up, it's going to be unlike any other. Thank you for tuning in. Take care till the next presentation.